believing in the gospel. Romans 1:16, it tells us that I'm not ashamed of the gospel because it's the power of God unto salvation for all those who believe. But the thing that brings that scripture to life is scriptures where I think it's 1 Corinthians 1:1. It might be 1 Corinthians 1:1, but it's a scripture where it says, Christ did not send me to baptize, but to preach the gospel, not with wisdom and eloquence, lest the cross of Christ be emptied of its power. So that scripture alone is showing us a connection. Okay, there's a connection between the gospel of God and the cross of Christ. How do we know? Because Paul says, when I come to preach the gospel, I'm not going to preach it with wisdom and eloquence. In other words, I'm not going to distort the message, the words that's supposed to come out in this giving of the gospel. I'm not going to distort these words. Why? Because the cross of Christ is going to be emptied of its power. Now, if we pause right here with the cross of Christ, scripture tells us the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. But to us who are being saved, it is the power of God, right? So the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us, it's the power of God. So the message of the cross has to have a connection to the gospel. Or in other words, it must really mean that the true gospel message is the message of the cross. And this is why Paul was saying, when I preach this message, it's not going to be with wisdom, eloquence, or the cross of Christ. This power that's hovering over this moment is not going to break out like it needs to. How do we know it's supposed to break out? Because Romans 1:16 says us that the power of God begins to save those who believe. So that's one revelation on all of what the gospel, of more of what the gospel is. It's truly the message of the cross. And if we ask ourselves, what is the cross saying to us? Christ says, anyone who wants to be my disciple must take up their cross and follow me. They must deny themselves, take up their cross and follow me, right? So, that in itself is also telling us, okay, if I want to understand more about the gospel, let me search more about the cross. These are just pieces that we have to put